Hello everyone, welcome to yet another one of my short videos. This time it's covering three separate topics which are all interesting on their own, I hope, but in fact I'm trying to demonstrate how they actually complement each other in this particular application. So the first is tmux, which gives you persistent sessions and allows you to connect to multiple servers and synchronize what you're typing with all those servers. The second is an LVM snapshot, which is really useful if you're making any kind of change to a server, to a physical server, and you want to be able to ensure that you can roll back should all go horribly wrong. And then the third is simply an upgrade of Proxmox from version 8 to version 9. So let's do it. Let's start with a brief overview of tmux and then a quick demonstration. And then we can move on and look at the next topic, which is the LVM snapshots. So first question is, why would we use tmux? And it's basically because of its persistence. By the way, tmux is a successor to a program called Screen, which is really similar. Okay, but they both hark back to the days of modems when you had unreliable connections and you needed a way of being able to connect to a remote server. You probably expected to lose your connection at some point, but you could reconnect and continue with your work at that point. So let's quickly look at some of the tmux commands. To actually start a tmux session, you simply type tmux. To attach to an existing session that's already running, you type tmux attach or tmux a. You can usually use abbreviations as long as they're unambiguous. You can list the current sessions with a tmux list-sessions or a tmux ls. You can attach to a session by a specific number because by default they are numbered. So tmux at a minus t1 will attach you to session 1. And you can also name your sessions, so you can create a new session and give it a name, which makes it easier for you to remember what that session is connected to. When you're in the session, then all commands start with Control B. So Control B D is the way you exit a session without losing. It doesn't kill it, it exits it, whereas Control BX will kill a session, but it will prompt you, are you sure? The simplest way of using multi-pane function, which I've demonstrated a few times, is simply to create a file called .tmux.conf and in there put that somewhat cryptic command, which basically says bind the Control X key sequence to synchronizing the panes. So you would type Control B, Control X to connect all your panes together. Otherwise, you simply move between panes and type in the different panes. To create the multiple panes, you use Control B % and Control B double quotes to open panes to the right or beneath the current pane. Switching between the panes, you use the the cursor keys, but preceded by Control B. So Control B down arrow takes you to the pane below, etc., etc. To lock the panes together, so when you type command in, it runs on all four panes, you type Control B, Control X, and then to switch back to a single pane, Control B, Control X again. Really nice one is Control B Z, which will zoom you into a single pane. Control BO is also useful. It's less painful to type than the cursor keys, and it will cycle through the panes. .tmux.conf is the easiest way to create your Control X binding to synchronize the panes. But if you're already in a session, there is a Control B command, which is a bit painful to type in, but it works, and that's the :set W synchronize panes on command. Okay, and again, as we've said, Control B, Control X takes you in and out of synchronized panes. So that's basically a really quick overview of tmux. Let's run tmux, and immediately it puts us into a session, and we can cd2/etc, do an ls for instance, and fine, that's fine. So we do a Control B D to disconnect, go away for a week, come back and do a tmux ls for list sessions, and we can see that we have a session running. So we can do tmux a, and that will attach to that session. If there were multiple sessions, we'd need to use -t0, for instance, because this is session 0, but we don't need to if we've only got one session. So we reconnect and you'll notice the screen is still there and complete. So that's it really. So, but let's just quickly look at the multiple panes because I know people always like that. So that's, if you recall, it's double quotes and percent sign. Control B, percent sign, gives you a pane to the right hand side. And remember, Control B, cursor key, moves you between panes. Control B, open double quotes, opens a pane below. And Control B, cursor key, moves across to the right hand side. Control B, double quotes, opens a pane below. I now have my 4 panes. If I type Control B O, I move to the next pane. So we simply cycle through the panes with Control B O, which is good. Remember, you can use the cursor keys. If I do Control B Z, then I zoom in on the pane that I'm currently focused on. Do Control B Z and I go back to being 4 screens where it's more difficult to read, but has the convenience of Control B, Control X, which has locked all the screens together. Do an LS and the LS runs on all 4 screens. You get the general idea of this now. And oh yeah, one other very useful command, which I don't think I mentioned before, Control B question mark actually lists all the bindings. So it basically shows you all the different commands that you can use, of which there are a ridiculous number and of which I know about 10%, and it's more than enough. I'm perfectly happy with my 10%. So that's tmux. Okay, after recording that last session, I realized that my statement that I probably know 10% of the commands is probably incorrect. I probably know 1%. Tmux is ridiculous as to what you can do. So I thought I'll do a little bit of research and find out, am I missing out? And yes, I am. So for instance, there's an example of a really complicated looking alias, and that's going to actually create me a command which, if I run it, will create my 4 panes and log me into my 4 nodes in one go. So that's fun. Actually, it's really quite useful. I quite like that. So okay, having entered the rabbit hole of tmux, I then did a bit more research and came up with another tmux.conf. Now, the first line is actually what we've already seen. The second line enables scrolling, but also enables mouse operation. Now, that is really cool. I didn't know you could do that, so that's good. I was aware that it was difficult or impossible with what I knew to scroll back, so this is a major step forward. Now, the default scroll history is 2,000 lines. So at the moment I've got mine set to 50,000, which is probably a little bit excessive, but so that's the next command. And then the final one simply improves the output color-wise and things like that. So that's quite good. So let's go across to a terminal. Let me show you briefly what I found and why I like it, even though it's a teeny bit insane. So here we are on Camaro. If I do alias cluster, that's the cluster that I've created. I've put it in .bashrc. And that's what was on the screen a few seconds ago. And I won't go through it with you. I think it's fairly self-explanatory, so I'll leave you to look at it. If I then type cluster, it will create my 4-screen cluster immediately. So there you go. So we now have a 4-screen display, I mean, not cluster. And I also now can click on a pane and switch between them, which is less painful than typing Control B cursor key, so that's really cool. And I can also do things like, for instance, a right-hand mouse click brings up a menu, and so I can do things like additional panes. I can move panes around, kill a pane, etc., using the mouse. So this really is a major step forward from mankind, from what I knew before. So I thought I'd share that with you anyway, because I think that is quite an improvement on what I had before. All right, so let's now move on. So we're now going to move on to LVM snapshots. Remember our objective. The reason we're doing this is because we want to do an upgrade of our Proxmox server or servers, and we want to be able to ensure the upgrade continues to run. We don't end up with a corruption of some sort. And why do we want LVM snapshots? So if our upgrade goes horribly wrong, we can revert back to prior to the upgrade. So that's where we're going now. Time to look at NVM snapshots. It's early in the morning, you'll have to excuse me. It's also very cold. Okay, so the basic idea of a snapshot, and this is pretty much the same for most versions of logical volume manager support or whatever, is that you have an additional volume which is usually considerably smaller than the root volume, and this is simply because it only has to reflect any changes that have occurred since we took the snapshot. So the snapshot, the name comes from the idea of taking a photograph, the old terminology, take a snapshot of someone. So you take a snapshot at a point in time. Well, this is a similar concept really. So I'm going to try and show it diagrammatically, and then we'll do it. So the idea here is we've got some data, it's some data in red, and we're going to write it to our root volume. Now, the root volume is slightly different, not in terms of creating or using snapshots, but in terms of management, as we'll see later, a little bit different, simply because we can't unmount the root volume, because that would be taking the ground from beneath our feet. So we want to write data to the root volume. Now, the first thing to bear in mind is that the root volume itself will be exactly as it should be. In other words, it will be consistent with the instant in time that we're using it. And the idea of the snapshot volume is that it's going to allow us to go back to a different point in time in the past. All right, so we will want to update the root volume. But if we do that, we lose our old data. So what we actually do is this. We actually copy the data that we're going to overwrite onto the snapshot volume. Having done that, we now have the ability to put it back at a later point. Now, the whole process is known as copy on write, and this is the copy bit. So before we write our new data, we copy our old data. We can then write our new data, so the write bit of copy on write, and then basically what we have is the root volume behaving exactly as it should do, and we have a snapshot volume with a copy of the original data before it was changed, and that is the important thing. That's what we're after. All right, and therefore in the future we can either just delete the snapshot, we don't need it, we decide everything went to plan, so we just get rid of it, or we can roll back. And to roll back, we just copy all of the data in the snapshot volume back into the root volume. Now remember, the only thing in the snapshot volume are blocks that were changed since the point in time we took the snapshot. So we call this a merge. So we merge the data back into the root volume, and now we've recovered. What we're going to do now is actually do this, then we'll do an upgrade to version 9, and then we'll roll back. Okay, so let me now actually look at the steps involved in doing it, and I'll do this, go through it quickly on slides, and then actually we'll do it. But an important point is that after we do this, the actual snapshot is deleted. So you can't sort of keep a snapshot and keep reverting back to the same snapshot. It's not a problem, you just recreate a snapshot at this point in time if that's what you want to do. Basically, the first thing we need to do is work out how much free space there is. Now, I'm not going to teach you Logical Volume Manager if you don't know it today. I am going to do a session on it because I really like Logical Volume Manager in Linux. It's really cool. But we run our VGS command. That will tell us the name of the volume group, because we're going to need that. If there's more than one volume group, a volume group is like a pool of disks, effectively. If there's more than one volume group, we've got to work out which one we're interested in. In a default Proxmox setup, then there will only be one, and it has always been called PVE to my experience. And we need to know how much space we've got free, and that's at the end. And so we got 13.75 gigabytes free here. And it's surprising how little you need, actually. In fact, I was going to say, remind me to check how much space an upgrade takes. I will try and remember. So how do we actually create an LVM snapshot? Well, LVM is lovely. It's got really consistent and understandable commands once you understand the concepts. So we do an LV create, and we've got two syntaxes. One of them is kind of shorthand if you want. So I've put them both up. I quite like the longhand because it's sort of self-documenting, but LV create -- snapshot, that's what we want to do. -- size, I chose an arbitrary figure of 10 gig. I only want one snapshot, so I might as well use as much of that 13 gig as I feel comfortable with. -- name, call it pre-upgrade. People often put dates in there, but you can actually go and see the date it was created, so that's not a problem. And don't forget, my favorite is to leave the last bit off, which is what is it you want to snapshot? and the syntax is PVE slash, PVE is the volume group, slash volume name. So it's volume group slash volume name, PVE slash root. This would be instant because all it does is effectively reserve space. It doesn't actually make anything. The syntax you can use is -s for snapshot, -L for size, -n for name, and then obviously the syntax other than that is the same. So that's really cool. So now let's have a look at what we've actually done. And if we do an LVS again, and I've highlighted in green, what we can see is we've actually got a new volume, which is 10 gig in size, and it will show us when it starts to be used a percentage of how much is it currently in use. When important point to make, if it hits 100%, not the end of the world, but we've lost our snapshot. It's now become, or it would start to become corrupt. Effectively, it's no longer usable. Right, so let's do it, okay? And what I'm going to do is actually upgrade all 4 nodes at once, which is an incredibly silly thing to do, but you know, what the hell. We're going to upgrade all 4 nodes at once because we like living dangerously. In a production environment, you wouldn't do this. You'd do one at a time. You'd have also used your test environment to make sure that the upgrade is fine and works and you're happy with it. But what the hell? Okay, so currently, they are locked. Currently, they're locked. So any command I type in appears in all 4 screens. But the only problem with that is it's quite difficult to see. So I'll do you remember the Control B Z? So I've zoomed in, and now we can see it a lot clearer. Okay, so we do our LVS, and we see that we don't have a snapshot. So let's create one. So if you remember, LV create, -s for snapshot, -L for size, -n for name, PVE slash root. Hit enter. The origin name should include the volume group. Use LV create. Ah, right, okay. I've made a mistake. Volume group PVE, it does. The origin name, which is PVE. Oh, it's because look what I've put. Oh, you just proving I am human. I think you already worked that out. Okay, logical volume pre-upgrade created. There you go, not surprising. And if we now do an LVS, lo and behold, we now have a snapshot called pre-upgrade. It is 10 gig and currently it is in 1% usage, or has 1% usage. So there we go. We're now in a position to be able to roll back should we want to, but we don't want to yet, obviously, because what we're going to do next is put together our tmux session and our snapshot. Oh, I've just realized I've only done it on Transam, because when you zoomed in, you're only operating on that node. I'll actually remove it. LV remove pre-upgrade. Oh, I need the volume group. It's, by the way, it's early on Sunday morning. If I keep making mistakes, that's my excuse. All right, do I really want to remove the snapshot? I do. If we now do LVS, we can see it's gone. So I'll just do that again. Okay, so we've lost our snapshot. So let's come out of the zoom. Let's clear the screen and let's do LV create -s -L 10 gig -n for name, and this time we'll get the name right, and PVE slash root. Okay, and we do LVS and we can see that we've got our pre-upgrade. I'll zoom in so it's all a bit clearer. Okay, so LV create -s -L 10 gig -n pre-upgrade PVE root created our snapshot, and with the LVS we can see that that snapshot's there. And if we do a VGS, we will actually see that we now have 3.75 gigabytes free, whereas previously, and I forgot to show you, but previously I showed you in the slides actually, we had 13.75, so we've lost 10 gigabytes of our free space, which is what we would expect. So let's zoom out. Okay, we now have a snapshot, and we now know how to remove a snapshot if we don't need it anymore. So later we'll find out how to actually merge back in. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at actually doing a an upgrade to PVE version 9, which at the time of making this video is 9.0. So I definitely wouldn't be doing it. Not yet. It's too early. I would want a later release. So I'm going to go and have a cup of tea, then I'm going to come back and we'll do an upgrade. and we'll upgrade all 4 at once, which is completely insane. Fine, as long as you understand that. You do one at a time and test it, etc., etc., and for other reasons as well. Right, so our cluster is up and running. It's in a Core 8 state. All 4 servers are online, and all of our VMs are currently running. So that's good, a good start. So let's go across to our terminal. And as you can see, I'm actually across on Camaro, and we've got our fabulous tmux session running. And let's just zoom in on Transam and remind ourselves that we also have a snapshot called pre-upgrade so that we can roll back if we need to. So Control B, Z. Now I'm now back in. Are they linked? Yep, they're linked. So clear the screen. So what we have to do is first of all make sure everything's okay. So we can run a PVE 8 to 9, and we can also use an option -- full, which I've actually found is pretty much unnecessary. And this is doing a test. So what we're actually doing here is testing whether the system that we're on is suitable for upgrading from version 8 to 9. So let's hit return, and off she goes. And of course it's all flown off the screen, and there's 4 of them at once, so it's all very painful. But you'll notice that we've got 1 failure, so we're going to need to sort that out. We've also got a couple of warnings. However, at the bottom screen we've got 3 warnings and no failures. And that's rather strange, seeing as they're all these little HP minis. But the top 2 machines are actually a different CPU than the bottom 2 machines. So that may well be something to do with it. Now the problem is, now we could run this again and pipe it into more, but the problem is it is really hard to see. And we only really care about the failures, at least at the moment. Okay, so let's zoom in on Transam, which has a failure. And let's run that again. And we'll grep for the word fail, because that is the keyword in capitals that indicates we had a failure. So we hit return, and it actually says systemd boot package is installed, and that will cause problems on upgrade. So we need to remove that. So let's go back and let's switch to one of the servers that simply had a warning rather than an error, and repeat that process. Well, there are no errors, so we've got 3 warnings. So let's do a PVE 8 to 9 and pipe grep for warn, and let's see what these 3 warnings are. And oh right, one of them is it's saying that the virtual machine that's running on that node is actually currently running, so we need to sort that out, because we are recommended that they're either moved off, which obviously would be the best, or shut down. So we'll shut down, because we're going to do all 4 nodes at once, which is bonkers, remember. Oh right, interestingly, it's warning us about the systemd boot package, but it's not saying that it's an error on these machines. And it looks like that's because we're using legacy boot. So that's fair enough. I think that's 2 fixes straight away. So 2 fixes is shut down all the VMs, and the second fix is to remove systemd boot. So let's go back out. Let's go back to Transam. We are currently locked. So let's start off by removing systemd boot. So I was going to do a pkg remove. I suddenly switched to Solaris. apt remove systemd boot. And we do want to remove it. Okay, so we've removed it from all 4 nodes. And actually that should have cleared our error on Transam. So let's do a PVE and see what the result of that is. Okay, we've reduced the number of warnings down to 2, one of which we know is a running VM. Oh, okay, so the other one is it's saying that we should have a package intel-microcode installed. I'm not going to worry about that. So let's quit out now and run PVE 8 to 9 test on all 4 servers and check that warnings 2. We've got 2 warnings, one of which is that the VM's running, so we'll fix that. And the other warning is that we haven't got the Intel microcode installed. So now let's go to a browser here and actually shut these VMs down. Now, all of these VMs have a QEMU guest agent installed, and in options they all have, where is it, QEMU guest agent enabled. Go to the console so you can actually see this. What this will do is shut down gracefully, because when you have the QEMU guest agent installed, then the Proxmox GUI can control this VM. This is a bit like VMware agents. Yes. And we can do that on all of them. Shut down. So now all of our VMs are shut down. So we should now be down to one warning. And I'm not even going to worry about that particular warning. Okay, so actually, let's just to remind you what that is. That warning is this Intel-microcode could not be found. Consider installing it. We could do that, but life's short. Let's not bother. Okay. All right. Now we need to go back to that browser. I'll put the URL for this page in the either in the chat or on the screen. And this basically is how to update from version 8 to 9. So here it refers to us running the tests. And then basically, it's really quite interesting. All you do, the new version of Proxmox uses the Trixie Debian release, which is Debian 13. And so all you have to, and previously it was using Bookworm. So all we have to do is in our sources.list, which is the apt configuration file, and in underneath sources.list.d, PVE enterprise.list, we have to change Bookworm to Trixie. And he's using a sed command. He's using a sed -i, which stands for inline. -i was a new feature in Linux. I say new, it's probably been in for almost as long as I've been alive. No, Linux hasn't been around that long, but it wasn't there in Unix, is what I'm trying to say in a rather long-winded way. So if we literally just run those two commands, so let me copy that, and let's go back to our okay, sed -i Bookworm. So we're doing a sed -i substitute Bookworm for Trixie globally on each line in those two files. So let's hit enter. So if we buy etc. Sources.list, what was originally Bookworm has now become Trixie. So we've now updated our sources.list file. Now all we have to do is an apt update, basically. So we do an apt update followed by a dist-upgrade. So it says there are 581 packages that require upgrading. We've done an apt update, so we can now do apt dist-upgrade -y. This is going to be 581 packages. So I'm going to make you sit through and watch every one. No, I'll obviously pause the recording while it does this. It is basically just an apt upgrade, so it's no big deal. But towards the end, it's going to come in because some of the packages actually change their configuration file. For instance, SSH. Okay, the maintainer has released a new version of the configuration file. You appear to have made changes to your configuration file. Do you want to keep the maintainers, or do you want to actually use your original file? Whatever you do, you will have the old file and the new file still in existence, so you can merge any changes that you made into the new format, or choose to ignore it completely, in which case you might not be using some of the new features of whatever application this is. Let me hit enter, and I'll pause the recording so that we can come back when it gets to the point where it's asking me whether I want to keep files or not. It's now got to the point where it's actually asking me, do I want to keep a particular file, or do I want to actually use the maintainer's new version? Now, I'm actually going to go through and just say yes to all of these. In other words, yes is install the package maintainers version, because I haven't made changes to any of these files. And so I'll just blast through that. But when you come to do this, actually check and see whether this matters or not. I'll do that and then come back. Okay, so I'm just going to say yes to all of these questions, and then I'll pause the video. Okay, that has succeeded. I didn't time it actually, but it took about 10 to 15 minutes, but it's irrelevant, because the time it will take will be dependent upon your hardware. All right, so let's go and look at the browser. Well, we're going to need to reboot them all now. In fact, in the documentation, it says you must now reboot. So let's do that. Let's go up to Transam, synchronize all the screens and do a reboot. Okay, by the way, there were no errors at all, but it's fine. So we'll reboot all 4 nodes, which will of course kill our session, and I'll come back to you when they're all back. Okay, so they're all back. Cobra lost the race, Transam won, and there was quite a marked difference in time between the installations, but that's fine. So first of all, let's just see if the cluster is running okay. So PVECM status, and apparently all 4 nodes are still in the cluster. That's good. Let's do a PVE version, and apparently we're running version 9.0.1. So let's go and have a look at the GUI. So it's showing that we're running PV Manager version 9, so that's good. There are changes in 9 apparently. Bear in mind I've not used it particularly. One of the ones that I'm interested in is it says that they have some improvements to HA. So let's go into HA. There we go, affinity rules. These are new rules which I've never even looked at before, but basically they say you can specify that 2 machines must never appear on the same node, 2 virtual machines must never appear on the same node, or they must always appear on the same node when possible. So for instance, if you had an application and a database and you wanted them both to run on the same node, you can do that. And if you had 2 web servers that were serving the same application for HA purposes, you'd want to be sure that they didn't both appear on the same node. That's one of the improvements. Apparently there's also improvements to LVM snapshots, but as I say, I haven't really looked into it in great detail. Because I had all of the virtual machines set to start at boot, I'm expecting them all to be running, which they are. Well, that's good, a good sign. I mean, this is hardly an in-depth test, but let's log in on one, just make sure it works. So we apparently can log into these VMs. They appear to be okay. Like I say, not exactly an in-depth test. So that's fine. So that's wonderful. It looks good, and hopefully it is good. So let's assume that it wasn't. Let's assume that it all went horribly wrong. So what I want to do next is actually roll back so that we actually should get back to PVE version 8. Okay, so that's the master plan. So let me move across the Transam, not that it matters. Make sure they're all synchronized, which they are, and let's actually do a rollback. So what we want to do is an LV convert -- merge, and you then specify what it is you want to merge back in. Okay, let's just check that. Yep. So what we're doing here is we're rolling back to a point prior to when we did the upgrade. We'll do this, and we will need to reboot because it's the root volume. If it wasn't the root volume, we wouldn't need to reboot. And in fact, it's kind of telling us that. It's saying delaying merge since the origin is open. In other words, the root volume's mounted and we can't unmount it. We're also going to have to take another step after we've rebooted. So let's reboot, which will kick me out of this session. I'll pause. Okay, so that took quite a while. Wouldn't it be wonderful if in the real world you could pause time while things that took a long time happened? Okay, so there is a problem. Well, it's not a problem, but there is something we need to do. If we do an LVS, what we're expecting to see is that our snapshot has disappeared. And if we do a PV, which it has, by the way, if we do a PVE version, we're expecting to see that it says version 8, and it does, 8.4. So everything's gone wonderfully, apart from one thing. And if you look in the LVS output, so let me actually zoom in on Transam. Notice the root volume has got a capital O, which stands for, I keep meaning to look it up. I haven't got a clue what it stands for, but I know what it means. It means the volume isn't active. So we need to activate the root volume. Until we do that, okay, we haven't finished rolling back. So if we do a Control B Z, go back, and we do this time we do an LV change. It's all a bit cryptic, I appreciate that. Okay, so LV change -- activate Y PVE root. Now you don't normally have to do this on volumes that are not the root volume. They will automatically be activated, but the root volume you need to do manually. Again, you can actually abbreviate that to LV change -AY. So that's cool. So if we hit return, Unfortunately, it didn't explode. Do an LVS, we should find that capital O has now disappeared, and it has against the root. And so we now have completed our rollback. So if we now go and have a look at the browser. Okay, here we are over on the browser, and we can see that all 4 nodes are back online. Let's actually check if the virtual machines look okay. So VM, that's running. Go to the console and we have a login. I could log in, but I'm not going to bore you with that. So let's go to Charger, summary, and we are running PVE Manager version 8. So we've successfully rolled back. So in fact, there you go. We finished this particular little objective that we had, which was to roll back to version 8, which hopefully you won't be needing to do. But remember, do one at a time, don't do all 4 at once. It will take quite a while, so your virtual machines will be down. If you have a cluster, that is, your virtual machines will be down while you do the upgrade. And it took, I think it was about half an hour. So it's actually on my slow hardware. So it's actually quite a long-winded process. But there you go. And we got some nice new features, particularly in HA. That was the one that struck me as the most interesting when I read the documentation. But I recommend you go and check it all out and see whether the enhancements are of interest to you. And if they're not, I wouldn't bother upgrading yet. I'd wait for a later release personally, but that's just a personal opinion. Okay, so thanks for watching this rather long-winded video. I hope it was useful. I hope you learned something. I find every time I watch, no matter how long I've been working on Unix or Linux, when I watch someone else's video, I always end up going, oh, that's interesting. I don't normally do it like that. So I learn something every time, and I hope that's the same for you. Please do subscribe, please like, please click on notify, etc., etc. And thank you for watching. Goodbye, everyone.